How has Amendment 1 impacted LGBTQ activism in North Carolina? Well, first of all, Amendment 1 was something that the Republican-controlled North Carolina General Assembly, State and House, decided to put this amendment before the voters in terms of the May primary. And it simply said this, is that they wanted to legally define marriage as marriage between legally married one man and one woman, and how that would define the term marriage. But what would go along with that, besides that automatically being it, not supporting marriage between same-sex couples, it meant that there are tons of people who live in the state of North Carolina who are common law. They're not married. Well, now that this law passed, if they're common law, then let's say the woman's a victim of domestic violence of her male partner. Before this law, they had recourse. She could take him to court. She could have some kind of recourse legally. That's gone now. Because unless you're legally defined married, one man, one woman, also Duke University, for instance, has domestic partnerships. But because it's a private institution, you can have same-sex couples, or you can have domestic partners who are male and female, not married, but they're not going to be impacted by this because Duke is a private institution. But if it's anything not private, all those rights are gone. So essentially, people had to vote, and unfortunately the vote went the way of, we want to support marriage defined as man and woman. But the good news, in my opinion, was that they tried to do this black versus gay, thinking that the African American community, because they think they're more homophobic, would automatically vote for this idea of one man, one woman. But it turned out, because of the North Carolina NAACP, and also because who was the last set of people who dealt with marriage equality? Interracial marriage, couples, that's black folk. So they said, wait a minute, didn't we just deal with this not long ago around the issue of marriage equality? So it turned out a lot of the African American communities in huge numbers across the state voted against the amendment. And the media thought, well, then why are black people voting against this amendment? Because they weren't pro-gay. It was like they were saying, we have already dealt with this issue as a marriage equality issue, not that we support gay marriage. And because of that history, they ended up voting against it. But more importantly, Reverend William Barber of the North Carolina NAACP came out and said, we have got to support marriage equality, and came out with a very public statement. And then after that, the national NAACP came out with marriage equality, which is profound. And then President Barack Obama, who hadn't made up his mind yet, he too came out with support of marriage equality. How do you gain the support of allies? We do not win anything without allies. There's not one social justice movement that's come down the block that we don't win it. Civil rights movement, United Farm Workers, so on and so forth. I think when I hear the word ally, like, I'm a black lesbian, but I can be an ally to the growing Latina community who wants support for their right to go to school in public schools and colleges in the state of North Carolina. I can be an ally that way. I always think of ally as anything that you're just, it's almost like whatever you define the constituency or the issue, whoever is not that comes in and supports you, that's how you define ally. If you're talking about les, bi, gay, trans, it's our straight allies. So whatever you have, whatever your definition of what you could perceive to be the folk trying to make change, the allies are the ones who come in and say, I have nothing to lose, but I want to see how I can help support your issue. That's what allies are like, in terms of what allies have been in the past. But I sometimes think, unless you say specifically, we want to have allies involved, you can't assume it. Which is one reason why I say, if you have a student group called LGBT, put LGBT and A for allies, because you have to be explicit that we want you to be a part. And how do you gain the support of allies? Here's a question I ask most of my white friends. They always say this question, Mandy, how can we get more people of color to our meeting? How can we get more people engaged in what we're doing? And then I'll ask them this question, when's the last time you ever went and you were the only person not of the majority in a room? Never. Well, you can't keep on asking people of color to become part of your group if you're majority white if you don't take the time to be a part of their group and go to where they are. It has to be intentional, and it has to be serious, and it has to mean that you really mean it. And how do you prove you really mean it? Show up, show up, show up, take part in, be a part of. And common purpose, social justice is a nice common denominator. Race, class, culture, gender, sexual identity, gender identity, ability, language, all of those things have to be taken into consideration, and to say, we welcome you, we want to be a part of us, and we.